still codependent, still alcoholic.
Hey, Robert.
How the hell did I get here tonight? You know, Tony begged me. Tony's like, God, I need a speaker so bad. I'm like, I don't do night meetings, Arcadia. And he's like, but Blaze, it's my birthday. And I'm like, okay. No, I did not know it was his birthday until after Scooter was done. So happy birthday, Tony. Thank you for inviting me. Delighted to be here amongst a bunch of you, most of whom I don't know. But there's a couple familiar faces out there, which is nice. I appreciate that. I triple identify. I was at a meeting Sunday where I heard a different variation. The way that I'm used to hearing it is, well, when you see you're an addict alcoholic, that's like you're saying a Doberman pinched your dog. Well, okay, so I'm a Doberman pinched your dog. I'm codependent addict alcoholic. The guy said it's like saying you're from Cleveland, Ohio. We all know Cleveland's in Ohio. You don't need to say both. My experience, which is part of a formula that probably some of you have heard before, experience, strength, and hope. My experience includes a couple of different fellowships. And you might not know it to listen to me, but I actually do look for the similarities. For those of you who know me, I am one of your go-to sources for criticism of program. If you were trying to make a case against any program, I've got your back. Because I can tell you what's wrong, what shouldn't have been said this way, got it all. People who only hear that part of my rap fail to notice that I actually go to meetings. Fail to notice that I actually do participate. I don't take everything at face value. So I always like to start with a disclaimer. If I say anything that doesn't feel like it helps your sobriety, fucking ignore it. If I say something that contradicts what your sponsor says, listen to your goddamn sponsor. If I say something that doesn't make sense from what you understand of the book, fucking forget me. Spend some time with the book. With that disclaimer in place, we're gonna ramble a little bit. In 2021, I was working towards the bottom that eventually hit me in February of 22. During that run, I started asking myself, well, what's wrong with that guy? Because I imagined people asking, what's wrong with that guy? By the end, I was drinking a fifth a day and smoking 2 grams a day with a fair amount of wax on top of that. So I was pretty strong. What's wrong with that guy? And for those of you who've sat through my shtick before, I apologize in advance. The answer that I landed on was, well, he traveled with the circus until he was 2, and he licked a wall socket when he was 5. Can we stop there? Usually people say yes, I can stop there. I did actually travel with the circus until I was 2. My father sold tickets for the Shriner Circus. We would follow along with the acrobats and the train. By the time I was 2, I had been in all 48 states of the contiguous continental states. Train didn't go to Hawaii, train didn't go to Alaska, but I'd been to the rest. And I remember none of it. About 5, and Grandpa comes back after being gone for a while and explained to me that he's been in the hospital, but no one can quite explain what's different. Someone suggests that it's kind of like he stuck his finger in a light socket. To try and make sense of where Grandpa went, I ended up putting my tongue on a ball socket. I remember very distinctly the smell of ozone. I don't remember much else. Now, those are not typical qualifiers. I've got some typical qualifiers as well, and we'll get to those. I don't know that I believe in the genetic model. I don't know whether or not we're born with it. I know people who seem to be easier to understand if I take their history into account. I know people who seem to be easier to understand if I take their parentage and stuff into account. None of that serves me as well as asking, what do people do to get their shit together? So I don't fall anywhere in particular on those kinds of questions and issues. For me, it's, do you have something I want? And if so, is it something I can learn, that I can pick up? Either by monkey see, monkey do, or by, following a recipe that you give me, or just when you say no, don't, and when you say yes, do. I mean, those are three kind of ways that people learn. We stop when someone says no, we do more when someone says yes, or we do monkey see, monkey do, or we get a recipe. I get all three of those by going to meetings and talking to lots of different people. So the question becomes then for me, how do I stay sober? How do I stay sober? Why do I stay sober? Do I stay sober? I went to bed sober last night, and I liked it. I got up this morning and I was sober, and I liked it. I think I'm going to do that again tonight. It's just a couple hours away. I think there's a fair chance I will make it to bed sober tonight. I've heard worse plans. But every single one of you that did the same thing last night and this morning has another way of saying it. And for me, one of the beauties of this kind of sharing, which is completely inconsistent with me being up before talking, but smelling for me in this kind of sharing is hearing as many different ways as possible of solving that problem. Because we all work from the same playbook, right? We've all got the 164 pages. So that's the official how to do it. And as I kind of hinted at, there's some stuff in those 164 pages that kind of makes me scratch my head. But I'll be respectful to our elders who wrote that and not go into details. There's also some really great, brilliant stuff in there. So I know that I can go any country, any major city, any continent, and find people that are working out of that same playbook. We share a language. We may not speak the same language, but we share a language. We share a language of self-exploration and self-improvement. We touched those steps. That's not nothing. I've had plenty of experience in other groups. I've known religious groups. I don't know any group as truly open and welcoming and forgiving as AA. I don't know any other place in the world where you can actually do 20 years, be Mr. Sobriety, fall flat on your face, burn it all up, and everyone that loved you before your relapse is sitting there waiting to help you back up after and during your relapse. There are a lot of judgmental places out there in the world. And sure, yeah, we all like to take each other's inventory. That's half the fun of trudging. Character assassination is a full-time job for some of my friends. But underneath that, or behind that, or in the core of that, my experience is when someone comes into one of these meetings and sits through what we sit through, it's not just a selfish desire to stay sober. I know for myself, one of the things that drags me out, actually I can't put those terms, let's be honest. I'm a morning person. So like Tony knows me from a 6:15 a.m. 6:15 a.m. meeting, which is like way crazy early for most people. For me, it's like, oh, thank God I've got something worthwhile to do because I'm gonna be awake. I wake up with birds. I understand that's not normal. For me, this is the weird meeting. Why am I in a meeting at 7 o'clock at night? I should be finishing dinner and getting ready for bed soon. I nonetheless recognize that whether it's first thing in the morning or last thing in the day, or in the middle of the night on a Zoom call, and I'll talk about another fellowship, I won't name it by name, but there is a fellowship that literally has 24-hour-a-day meetings. If you really are desperate for some 12-step action, there is a Zoom meeting every hour of the day. And that's probably just the one I know. I'm willing to bet if I know about one, there's probably a good dozen others. Maybe even be a straight up AA one that I just don't know about. When I drag myself to an evening meeting, or I saunter into a morning meeting, I know that I'm gonna spend that period of time with people who are at least willing to think about working from the same playbook, at least willing to think about spending some time improving themselves and me. I'm in a room full of people, most of whom I've never seen and may never again see. But for this brief moment, y'all are rooting for me. Even if you hate the fucking look on my face and that stupid fucking hat. Right? For the hour and a half, we're all on the same page and we're all on the same team. And we all want to see each other stand a little taller and do a little better. Now, some of us do that with a traditional Christian higher power. We've all heard the story about the woman with the doorknob in her purse, because that was the only higher power she could find. She decided a doorknob was her higher power, she put it in her purse and carried it with her. Well, okay, so maybe that's crazy as batshit superstition. Maybe, right? You know what? If that keeps her from drinking, rolling stop signs, and killing kids, I am all about that superstition. And if she does that for a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then one day expands and evolves into a different understanding of what higher power might be, expands and evolves, and that sounds so fucking arrogant. I don't mean evolves like, you know, my way or your way or anyone's way is right or wrong. But I mean, if someone starts with a limited concept of what it means to share and be directed by something bigger and better, and that's all I've got is, I've got this tiny little thing. Well, if that's all I've got, that's all I've got. And as time goes by, I learn to unclench, I learn to grasp a little more of what other people are sharing. So I try to listen to what people describe as their successes. And a lot of people, we hear a lot of talk about, you know, only a drunk can help a drunk. And no one wants to hear it from anyone who hasn't been there. Yes and no. I mean, honestly, does my car mechanic need to suffer the exact same problem with the timing belt that I'm having in order to fix the damn thing? Does my barber need to have exactly the same kind of fucking calico, my barber, that I had when I still had hair? No. Normies can help us if we're willing to accept it. Now, some of us are still so deep in our problems that we won't accept help from anybody. And only another drunk or addict or whatever seems to know how to get past that. And that's real, that's true. There are some of us who are still hurting so much that we won't let anyone help us, we won't let anyone in. And lots of times the people who've been coming to these meetings and listening to a lot of bullshit and working with a lot of people's bullshit have a better capacity to let people radiate where they are and get through it and get past it. There's, I think it's page 87. I am not a big book thumper, but there's a couple of sections that I really like, so I happen to know their pages. I think it's page 87 says, be quick to see where religious people are right, make use of what they have to offer. Well, what the fuck? Why just religious people? Right? I mean, dude, I want to make use of everything that's right. If someone knows some shit that I don't, lay it on me, please. And there's lots of it out there. Because as much as I like to think that I'm a smart guy, here's reality. Here's the tiny little bit of reality that I get to deal with, right? February 2022, I can't read right. Your clock's fast. February 2022, I was smoking a couple grams a day, probably half a gram of wax on top of that, drinking a fifth a day. I had started going to meetings again in November of 21, and the COVID spike came back. And the meeting hall that I went to, well, let's just say not all meetings are created equally. This particular meeting was not going to be doing social distancing, and I figured someone else needed that seat more than me, so I stopped going to meetings. As one can predict, I ended up crashing and burning. I was already well on my way. What happened when I got evicted in early February wasn't because of anything I had done in January, but something I'd been doing since June of before. So oftentimes when you have a bad day, it's not really you're having a bad day, it's just the bad day you had last year's catching up to you. So February 22, I get that knock on the door. Actually, I hear the walkie-talkies from the sheriff's first. I go, uh-oh, there's something downstairs. And then I get the knock on the door, and very, very polite, very, very gentlemanly sheriffs indicate that they are there to make sure that I am no longer there. My line of work requires that I dress funny. I had work the following morning lined up. I grabbed what I needed to still be able to make that commitment the next morning, and figured I was going to be sleeping in the car. Now, eviction, anybody who's been through it, you kind of know what's coming. So, there's a little part of your brain that's already thinking about the go bag. So I throw what I'm going to throw in the car. I go to Ralph's, I get some food for the car, and I get a bottle of Captain Morgan. And I do remember parking the car and opening the bottle and smoking some weed. And then I remember being walked into the Pasadena drunk tank, chanting, "Kill me now." I don't remember much in between. I'd already lost my storage unit and most of my, 95% of my physical belongings I'd lost in October of 21. In 22, I lost everything that wasn't in the car that day. Because after the drunk tank, I went to try and get my car. The key had snapped off from the ignition. The cops had kept my license. I couldn't go to a hotel overnight. I ended up taking a bus down to Long Beach. I was at Long Beach Memorial. Told a nice young lady around midnight, a nice young lady at the kiosk, that I was trying to not kill myself. I worked psych for 7 years in my 20s. So I kind of knew how to make that work. She said, "We've got a place for you." I did a week voluntary launch psychiatric, during which I found out that I had Medi-Cal. And that Medi-Cal would pay to put me in a nice place called Cry Help. Any Cry Help fools in the room? No, I feel so alone. Cry Help is an NA house in North Hollywood. I was there for about 3 months. I got a free ride on Medi-Cal. I was going to then get outpatient. I thought I was going to do outpatient with them, but by a very, very odd quirk of fate, I hate the term "God shot." I hate the idea that my life is so tied to coincidence. I ended up doing outpatient at Impact in Pasadena in a residential bridge housing, because it would hurt my feelings to call it a halfway house. Residential bridge housing, not in the same neighborhood of Pasadena, not on the same street, not on the same block. Literally, I got a bite back here nodding, literally across the street. Like, you go down the stairs and out the gate from the RVH. You don't turn left, you don't turn right, you walk right across the street. Your face will bump into the oak tree that I used to smoke dope behind when I got evicted in February 22. So just about 3 months later, Medi-Cal puts me literally across the street. So I don't know that I'm a believer, but I've certainly experienced shit that I don't pretend to understand. And whether or not there is some kind of big plan, I tell you this, shit like that happens, it makes you sit up and pay attention. I was fortunate that my first day outpatient, my counselor told me about this 6:15 meeting. It was walking distance from my RBH. I started going regularly. That's where poor Tony met me. That's why you've had to put up with this tonight. I know some other degenerates from that meeting. Absolutely, I hate to say, saved my life. And I hear people say, "Oh, a life beyond my wildest dreams." I'm like, motherfucker, you didn't dream very good. But I will say, I am, in fact, mostly loving my life. Some of you here know some grief that's entered my world very, very recently. Some of us have lost a tragic buddy. So, life still happens. Shit's still coming. And yet here I am on a Wednesday night when God knows I could be getting ready for bed, talking to one of the quietest, most polite rooms I have ever sat in. Thanks for letting me share that.
Hey.